the question that I wanted the panel to address really is what's happened in Cape Town since 2002. And I think, Tuns, we should probably begin with you, because I think if I'm right, you were working for the city in 2002. You've got the whole 20 years of experience. So, over to you. Tell us what's happened.
Thanks, Harold. Mike? Yeah, as being involved in Cape Town, firstly in an education environment and then working for the city of Cape Town, we were very keen to adopt the white paper in our policies as a city government. So we grappled, initially I was privileged to be a co-author of the white paper, and we grappled with the term responsible tourism versus sustainable tourism. Because poverty tourism is very sustainable. Always poor people to be exploited. We said, this is wrong. We need to find a new term. We need to inculcate that into our tourism environment, which is responsible tourism. Although the green tourism had, sustainable tourism had a green flag to it, we felt that responsible tourism had a bigger community flag to it. And we started to punt that. The City Council of Cape Town adopted a responsible tourism policy in 2009. In the same year, we won a Responsible Tourism Award at World Travel Market in London. We were very modest in receiving that award and saying, guys, we're just starting out. Really, we don't deserve it as yet, but we hope that we're on the right track. The lessons that we learned is that, and the white paper is actually correct in saying that it is government-led and private sector-driven, community-supported or adopted. And the challenge for us was to get that balance right. In the beginning, it was very hard, it was top-down, it was being government-led, government-enforced, and it didn't go so well with the private sector. So, lo and behold, the private sector came to us and said, if we want to do this jointly, we need to have a joint working committee that will give direction on what is feasible and what not. So the first few years was a little bit of a tussle to find common ground. What counted in our favor was the Soccer World Cup of 2010. Because we had a common focus all of a sudden. We were the first World Cup that had a responsible tourism, a responsible events policy in place, and it carried a lot of value for us to work together quickly before kickoff. So that was a bit of a catalyst to get things done. But then since then there was a bit of a slowing down of the keenness of all role players, including government, because what happened from about 2008 to 2012, we had incredible price hikes in electricity and in water. So the best thing that speaks to private sector is the bottom line. So guys were adopting grey water systems, doing the sun panels on the roof, doing outreaches into communities long before we introduced responsible tourism. So the adoption started much quicker, we cooperated much better, and just when the drought situation struck at its worst in 2018, local communities were saying, shut down tourism, they're stealing our water, our people need water, we need water. And what then happened was the industry pushed back and said, this is our consumption per capita, this is the grey water systems we have, these are the jobs that we keep in place. And immediately discussion swiveled and said, but who's the big consumer of water? It's the citizens of Cape Town. And we changed our campaign to say the tourism industry, to a degree, was already responsible in their practices in Cape Town. So we're very proud to share the best case scenarios that we've had over the years. A good example, and it was an outflow of staff being empowered within organizations where they started switching off lights, switching off air cons that weren't needed and so forth. But they took that learnings home, and all of a sudden we saw responsible citizens coming from responsible tourism applying the same principles at home. And that was a win that we didn't expect so quickly, but which is happening at the moment.
Chance, can I come back with you to the 2018 water problem? Oh, you're not alone in Cape Town having problems with water. Sao Paulo, where we also have a show, they got down to 3% in theirs. Yours wasn't quite that bad. But the consequence of being down to 3% was that they had to bus in tanker in the water, and the tankers were being stopped on the road and the bandits took them over. It was a dreadful situation. In the run-up to the 2018 WTM, I was being asked whether people should even come to Cape Town. And I was trying to encourage them to come. But the second question then is, will there be riots if the water runs out? There were in Sao Paulo, there weren't here. But then the other question, which I was asking too, is which hotel do I stay in because it's using the least water per bed night? Now, the hotel I was put in, which was not a million miles from this CICC, all they had done, literally, was to remove the bath plugs. They'd done nothing else to reduce water. Now, in the CICC, impeccable processes, hand sanitizers, reduce water flow. They'd done everything they could reasonably do to reduce the use of water. But there were clearly hotels doing nothing. Now, the question is, could government do more? And will government do more, Tons, next time there's a water shortage? Because it's going to happen again.
So, when we tackled the, can I get Mike? Thanks. When we tackled the water crisis, the data showed that the biggest consumers of water were the citizens of Cape Town. We reduced that to 50% with lots of mechanisms that we applied. The hotel industry or the accommodation industry was actually a small component. Even if we fixed that, we would have run dry. So the focus was on the local citizens. That same propaganda that we used in a big way, because we termed something that in tourism terms we said it might not go, it might linger on with Cape Town. We called it ground zero, day zero. You're going to reach day zero soon. And people started acting accordingly. So for us it was a learning, and I think we can apply that as government, we can apply that to the industry as well. Now what we need to do, I think, more carefully in the future is to monitor the consumption and to make sure that the big squanderers are held responsible for what they do. But I must say, in general, the tourism industry in Cape Town is doing a fine job in terms of responsible tourism. Maybe not all of them, but many of them. Just recently we won the African Responsible Tourism Award for one of our hotels close to the airport. I'm not allowed to say the name most probably, but they started from scratch building a hotel that is RT compliant from day one. It's one of the challenges that many of the old hotels faces, is that it's retrofit. They have an existing infrastructure which they have to adapt to the new technologies. But I think they're doing a sterling job. We can do better, of course.
So I'm quite happy to name them. It's the Hotel Verdi at the airport. What?
You said it.
I did. I'll take the responsibility for that. I'd just like to point out, though, that in Dubai, for example, the city is now requiring all hotels to report on their water consumption and their emissions of carbon on a monthly basis. And I think quite soon they will make that public knowledge. And they'll take a lead then, globally. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how other cities with water problems in particular respond to that.
You know, with water consumption, we already know. We have a metering system, especially on the bulk users. We know exactly how much water they use. For what they use it, we don't know. But we have a good handle on what they use, and we can work from there. If people exceed the accepted level per capita, we can adjust to that. But those are all very valid points. The one thing that came back from industry, which we were at loggerheads for some time, was the degree of measurement. Guys were saying, look, I'm running a business here, I'm trying to survive. don't burden me with too much recording. I can record up to a point. And I think in the beginning, many people pushed back because of that. As soon as they saw the benefits of it as a management tool, they started doing that voluntary. And I think as government, we have to share that message, to share the best practice, so that people can adapt it to their working environment.
Just one last point on this, Ton, so then we'll move on, I promise to you else. I think the point is that you don't need to know what they're using the water for. You need to just simply know how much water they're using. And that makes it much less onerous to report.
Yeah, for us it's important because many of the lush hotels have a big lawn, they've got big areas that they water. If they don't have a grey water system, then we object. So many of them have adapted their water usage already, but for us it is important to know how they spend it and if they use it wisely. But it's not something that we enforce because we have a control over the litres that they use, so we can monitor the usage for that.
Thanks, Tuns. Ilse, can we come to you perhaps to talk about your views on this from a Cape Town perspective?
Okay, from a Cape Town tourism perspective, our focus has mainly been on the movement, not necessarily away from marketing, but having a greater focus on tourism to the benefit of everyone. So we have moved towards destination management and community participation and destination readiness. And that's actually in line with what City Nation Place has said in 2018, where DMOs need to almost have a lesser focus on marketing and a bigger focus on destination management and the community component of that. And I know you were chatting to Tiens about the water issue, but unfortunately that's not our forte. That's the local government's forte, so I don't want to comment on that. But I will comment on the work that we have done from a community participation point of view, where we have tried to have residents participate in the tourism destination, and it has been quite difficult. And you raised very important points. How does a community participate in a destination if their basic needs are not being met? But we have had a number of successful projects, and I'll just list them. I won't take you through all of them. Our neighborhood experience development projects is where we go into communities, we identify products that are ready to participate, we train them, we open them up to access to market, local and international markets. And that's the economic impact of responsible tourism. We've partnered with CPUT, which is Cape Peninsula University of Technology, and we run marketing and business incubators with these products, and they get accreditation that they might not have had in the past. And we link them with local and international markets. We do mentorship. A big focus of what we do is on partnership. So we do mentorship with CEDA, the Small Enterprise Development Agency. And another very successful project has been how we change the narrative of tourism, that tourism doesn't only need to be in certain geographical areas. It's throughout the city, and we've called that the Township to Terra project, where we've actually linked the oldest wine estate in Cape Town, Groot Constantia, with Forum de Kasi in Khayelitsha. And visitors get to experience the best wines in the world with your Ekasi culture and Ekasi fine dining. So we're just trying to change the narrative of tourism. But have we done enough? No, I don't think so. I think that probably from a tourism perspective, the sector has operated in silos. As I said, you can't have residents participate in tourism if their basic needs are not being met. You can't have visitors participate in a destination if they're not safe. So rather than a siloed approach, I think we need to move towards a more interconnected approach, a systems approach, which is not only tourism looking at certain things, but it's other sectors as well, almost the ecosystem looking at the entire problem, because the problem is much bigger than tourism and cannot be solved by tourism in isolation. And now post-COVID, we've moved about 3 years backwards. So we have greater unemployment, we have greater inequality, so we're going to have to double up our efforts.
Lisa, I think it's fair to say that it is more difficult to do it in cities than it is in rural areas. Do you want to say a little bit more about the neighbourhood approach that you've developed? Because that's the most recent strategy that you've been employing. And I think, if I remember rightly, details of that are currently on your city tourism website.
Yeah, so we identify neighborhoods that are ready for tourism. Unfortunately, not all neighborhoods are ready. Everyone wants tourism. Everyone thinks that it's a quick fix and it's easy to get into. But there might not be tourism products in a specific neighborhood. They might not have the infrastructure for tourism. So we have a research approach where we identify on a certain scale which neighborhoods are ready. So we've started in Khayelitsha, Langa, and we specifically identify products. So we need to manage expectations as well. You can't go into a neighborhood and immediately that product's going to think, oh, I'm going to get 100,000 visitors within the next month. That's not going to happen. There are certain things that need to be done. Your product needs to be ready, the price needs to be ready, the quality needs to be ready. And then we need to build the relationships. Tourism is based on relationships. So we don't just take a product to the international market. It takes about 3 years to build those relationships. So it's a process that we go through. And obviously we need to ensure that the business, the staff, the owners go through the training. Some of the products are not ready to accept that training, unfortunately, and they do drop out. And then we develop those neighborhood products into routes, and we promote it to domestic and the international market.
One of the things that seems to me, Lisa, I'll come very shortly to you, Michael. One of the things which strikes me about what happens in Cape Town particularly, I think more even than it does in Johannesburg, is that the craft workers have the opportunity to test and pilot their new, for example, the new sculptures that they do in wire. And you see them talking to people at restaurant tables about how much they like it, how they'd like to see it change. And that opportunity to fine-tune the products to make them more attractive to tourists and for international sales is something that tourism contributes. Sure. And I think we should never forget how important that is for local communities and crafters in particular.
I think that's quite interesting. When I worked in Gauteng, I had a conversation with a crafter from Mpumalanga, and he made the most beautiful these sort of couches. I don't know what material they were made from, but they were amazing. And we said to him, "Can you not get more people employed to help you?" Because he couldn't handle the demand. He was the only one who was making it. So he wasn't meeting the demand. And he said, I've been doing this. I was taught this by my grandmother, and I'd been making this since I was 8 years old. So it's not just a matter of me getting more people to help me with the capacity to meet the demand. I've been doing it for 30, 40 years. And I think that's part of the difficulty with craft that is different, because you get a lot of the same craft. So, yeah, that's some of the challenges.
They get that opportunity to talk directly with the end consumer about how they might use that craft product. Which again is something missing if you're just trying to export into a market that you don't know and can't understand, given that you've not been to that destination. Tuns, just to come back to you briefly, I put up the slide, as I thought I had, of what you won for Cape Town in those early years that you were talking about. There have been almost no applications from Cape Town in the last few years, Tuns, and I find that disappointing. I don't know that it reflects what's happening, but it might be. I've really no knowledge what's happening in Cape Town. We'll come to the Western Cape in a minute, Michael, because we are getting applications from there. But one of the things I wanted to say really very clearly to everybody in the room is there's absolutely no doubt that South Africa still has the best national policy on responsible tourism. Nowhere in the world has a policy that gets anywhere close to it. But Tuns, just before we go to Michael, there's clearly an enormous gap between the policy and the implementation. Do you want to just comment on why you think that is?
I think originally it was miscommunication between the private sector and government. It was seen as another tax, another burden, and we didn't explain the economic value of it at the outset. It was all about the warm feeling. Warm feeling goes so far when you do ROI, and I think in many cases we spoke past each other. That was a big learning curve. And then secondly, implementation happens with the industry, doesn't happen with us. So we relied on small baby steps, and it didn't kick on because we had one crisis after the other which shifted the focus. And I won't call the World Cup a crisis, but it also shifted the focus to other deliverables in terms of infrastructure instead of responsible tourism. But the principles are still applied. It's economic benefit for local communities. It's the upliftment, social upliftment from tourism, and then also the environment integrity that we are working with. To say Cape Town is known as a beautiful city. So if we lose the scenic routes, if we lose the beauty of Cape Town, it loses a lot of its character. But in that process, we stick to the three principles. We will pick it up, I must say. I think we are now post-COVID poised to do that. And watch the space for the next 3 years. I think we will churn out some more deserving winners in Cape Town.
Well, it would be good next year, Tuns, to see an application on behalf of that neighbourhood manual, because I think that's a fairly unique piece of work that's been done in Cape Town.
Sure.
And it deserves to get a broader recognition than it's yet had.
Yeah.
So perhaps you could endeavour to try and get somebody to put that application in. Because as we always say, we can only award those things which apply.
Sure.
And if we don't get them put into the awards, we can't recognise them and give them the additional publicity. But Michael, can I come to you? Because you're obviously outside of the city, although you're not that far from it, and you benefit from being close to Cape Town in the Western Cape. Do you want to maybe say something about how you see the value of responsible tourism as a business? In the sense, picking up on Tuns's point, that they were perhaps not sharp enough to encourage businesses to see the business value of responsible tourism, but you've seen it very clearly, I think.
Phew. First of all, thank you for all being here and taking the time to listen. Appreciate that very much. I would like to give a few examples and then come back. When Tienes was saying they had the World Cup, and I don't know how much has happened in Cape Town after the World Cup, but our community there decided to build a soccer pitch at the time with funding that we raised actually from the city of Cape Town, as well as the Premier League and ABSA. And to cut a long story short, we started a community football, and it turned into a sports program in the center of 3 communities. Before COVID hit us, we had 9,700 beneficiaries. We were not only playing soccer, we were doing hockey, which is unheard of. It's a white man's elite sport. We had 355 children playing hockey. We had cricket. We had women's soccer. We had women's rugby. We had canoeing. And this all generated out of the World Cup. When COVID hit us, we took all our sports managers and everyone that was training, because we had to keep social distance, we weren't allowed to meet each other, we started a soup kitchen. And the soup kitchen, we cooked 800,000 meals as I sit here today. At the same time, we had a high school built for the kids around the area. There wasn't a high school. The high school was in Amanis. So we had a high school built. We produced vegetable gardens where the school kids are cooking. We have green little adventurers that we take into the Fynbos to take the kids to progress in future. So for me, responsible tourism, if we are looking at that, is uplifting the community from a low age. So we're starting with the kids at 6 years old, besides the ECDs that we are doing in the townships, where we take the kids from 2 years old and taking them forward to the future. So Ajax, the Cape Town Soccer Club, has just taken one of our kids now, who has progressed so far, into their team. So when you are asking from a tourism point, if one is not looking at responsible tourism, I think you can't be in the business. The world is screaming at us at the moment, not at South Africa, but worldwide. We are having climate change, we're having poverty all over the world, we have inequality all over the world at the moment, and we as tourism people, tourism entities, and tourism is massive. I mean, we're not only talking hotels, we are talking car hire, we are talking taxis, we are talking walks, guided walks, everything, is that we are able to collect the people, take them with us, and our clients are demanding that today. Our clients from all over the world are saying, how can we meet the people? What are you doing to be responsible? How much are you doing? So I think it's never been easier to do business on a responsible way. As what Tienes was saying, maybe it was responsible business was seen, or tourism, as a warm, cuddly thing. I don't think it's a warm, cuddly thing. I think it's a necessity. It's something we all have to do, starting from the taxi driver, going right through. Any questions on the floor?
While people are thinking, Michael, about a question for you, can I ask you, we've just given you an award yesterday for your progress on decarbonisation. Has that saved you money?
Oh, that's an interesting one. We are carbon negative. It took us 4 years. How do you become carbon negative? So it's about a 4-year audit, looking at your water, at your electricity, your garbage, where it goes to, your composting and everything. So we received 2,500 carbon credits, of which 1,500, every single client, I'm not allowed to mention the name where I come from, sorry, what I mean, every single client that comes to us is staying at Grootbos carbon neutral. So what is happening when you're looking at a business? We are now talking to all our tour operators worldwide, and they are booking their clients and paying us. So we are listed on a stock exchange where we are selling our credits, and the credits are sold at 250 Rand, minimum 125. And to give you a quick example, we just had a European TV show, and I couldn't believe it when he said, we have to offset our carbon through the people coming to South Africa and the freight. Well, we sold them 800 tons at 350 Rand a ton. We gained 270,000 Rand. The trick is the 270,000 Rand is not for Grootbos, but goes back into responsible tourism in the township. So very quickly, when we are talking about carbon credits, and if I'm not too long, is like using a plastic bucket that we buy in when we get sunflower oil, which we all know as trebled at the moment. We take that plastic container, we start a little business in the township, people have to walk for their water, The lady hires out that little plastic bucket, fills it with water so people can take it. And so this little plastic bucket is recycled 20, 30 times instead of landing somewhere on a rubbish dump. It's actually so easy. All the little programs that we run are based on something like this.
Michael, I just want to push you to talk a little bit about the employment creation you do outside of the lodge, particularly through your horticultural work.
Okay, so what we do realize, and I think as an entity, what we do, all our overseas and international people, as well as our South Africans, all want to participate, want to be part of change. It doesn't matter where you are. So we started a gardening school. We know in South Africa you can't get gardeners. Someone knocks on your door and says, can I be your gardener? What it actually means is, can I clean the swimming pool? Can I mow the lawn? So we started a gardening school with previously unemployed people in 2003. The school is still running today. We've done over 250 scholars teaching. You have to be unemployed. You should speak a little bit of English. You should be in Standard 8. We finance the entire program. Everyone gets 1,800 Rand pocket money. We finance all the meals. We finance the teachers. And now you're asking yourself, but who pays for all of this? Our tourists pay for it. They love the programs. They're part of it. One just has to be innovative. At the same time, by teaching, and this is the whole circle, by teaching gardeners, we need space for them to grow shady plants, sun plants, trees, and we sell those to the local community. So even during COVID now, we were selling plants to the local community. The project cost us 750,000 Rand for the scholars to come, and we made 680,000 through selling plants. This is all so easy. And when I say easy, it just needs a little bit of innovation and something you want to do. And I think us, all South Africans here, have to do something. We cannot sit here and if we look at the youth unemployment, we know the stats, 75%. We have to take the youth with us. It should be compulsory to do something. Okay, that's me.
Michael, I wanted to, if I may, come back to all three of you as we come to the end of this session. We've had now 20 years, and Mike Fabricius and I will be talking about the 2002 conference next in here for half an hour, reflecting on that 20 years. But I wanted to ask you three experts, given that Biden has told us we're in the critical decade, given that the Secretary General of the UN, Guterres, is frequently now pointing to the gap between policy and implementation, using some very strong language for a Secretary General that I'm not going to repeat, but really quite brutal language about the behaviour of the leaders around the world now in terms of having policies but then just not bothering to deliver. Obviously he's mainly talking about climate change, but it's across the piece. I wanted to ask each of you, and Lisa, if I may start with you, what do you think needs to happen to respond to this critical decade? We've had 2 decades, we've got 1 more decade to really make a difference. How do you think we could speed up and make more progress? So I'll come to you first, Lisa, and then Tuns, and then Michael, you'll get the last word.
Actually, based on where we're at, there isn't a quick fix. I think that we need to start at the level of the youth. I don't think there's been enough awareness. I don't know if any of you have visited Anova Park. There's a cleansing depot in Anova Park, but it's one of the dirtiest, with all due respect, it's one of the dirtiest communities you can go into because there are no bins there, but there's a cleansing depot. And 2, there's no awareness creation about the importance of these things that we're talking about. So we need to start awareness creation with the youth. We need to start awareness creation at schools at the grade R level, because if communities and parents aren't educating their kids, no one else is going to do that. And what we found with the water crisis as well, you know, the hotels and the big operators were very prepared, but the communities didn't necessarily have the same information, so it wasn't really trickling down, and they had other priorities. So that we need to start at the basic level to be able to get it right.
Lisa, if it cheers you up a little and you're sounding a bit as though this is a big heavy weight to try and lift, I think one of the things that we've learnt from Greta Thunberg and the Extinction Rebellion movement is that one of the most effective ways now is precisely to work with children who have quite a big impact on their parents. I see children telling their parents not to drop litter when I walk through the high street in my small town, and I think that is a big opportunity, but there's just so much to do. Tunt, are you similarly a bit worried about how we're going to make progress more quickly, or are you more optimistic?
I try to be optimistic, but I think we also have to face reality. We're not past COVID yet. We see things happening in Shanghai at the moment. We have to keep our eyes beyond the horizon. Many businesses have closed down in Cape Town, many of the small businesses. Some of them will reopen. Our estimate is that about 80% are severely affected of small businesses, and they will bounce back to the degree of about 50 to 60%. The rest will no longer exist. So there's a great opportunity in recovery as well to start new businesses with new principles and to inculcate that not just with the youth but also with the new startups, to say this is the right way to set up the business. This will buy resilience if you do it in this fashion. And the city has a whole resilience department and policy in saying to general businesses, not just tourism, because sometimes it's also seen that tourism is going to troop the flag. So we're saying to our manufacturing industries to do exactly the same, is to say you need to build in resilience and you need to be a responsible citizen. Just in short, quickly, when COVID struck heavily in Cape Town, the school kids got canned immediately in terms of the excursion. So they had no exposure to the industry. We went out to industry. They gave us their best responsible tourism examples. We recorded that in a nice quirky fashion that spoke to their hearts and introduced that into the schools. The first person that jumped up was the teachers in the front row that said, we don't have material like this. So we've started to approach the schools and then also the new startups through our business incubators to say, when you start on the right note, and that you don't need to reinvent the wheel, but learn from the examples that we have. I'm optimistic, and we're very keen to get beyond COVID and to say, how do we make it more real and more resilient for everybody?
We gave an award yesterday, Tins. It wasn't to a South African business, but it was to an African business. To a place, to a lodge which is collecting waste plastic and turning it into school furniture, which is a very evident way of demonstrating to young people in particular that there is money in waste and that you can do something if you just take those resources and use them in a different way.
Yeah, we have an example of a hotel in Cape Town that are no longer doing a Christmas party at the end of the year. They're using the recycled funds that they have, plus their Christmas party kitty, and saying, whom of your staff members do you nominate to have an upliftment experience? So it's fixing the roof, putting in a new battery into a car, all that kind of stuff, and they're taking care of each other under the banner of responsible tourism.
Michael, one of the things that strikes me about what you've done at Drought is you have done a hell of a lot on the property. That's absolutely clear. But you've also done a lot to reach out to the local community and to other businesses in the area. How do you see that we can speed up progress over this decade? Because this is the critical decade there.
Well, I just hope we don't have any or too many government officials here. I really think from government we are going to have difficulties implementing what you have said, but I would like to challenge Dennis and Lisa to say, why aren't we having a conference where we have all the hotels together, where we have all the role players, and see how can we uplift children? How can we train kids? What can our industry do? It is no good saying there is a Krotbos and there's a hotel at the airport, I'm not mentioning its name, and there's one that's doing a Christmas party. We won't get anywhere. We actually have to have a conference here, a 1 or 2 day. How do we change the perception of the children that you are worried about to become part of our community, to raise them to become good citizens and to participate on the wealth that actually Cape Town is creating as the #1 tourist destination in Africa? They should be doing, boy, I'm not saying that, much more than what they are actually doing. And I understand the throwback from COVID, etc. But we can't rely on 1 or 2 or 3 little hotels doing something. There should be a united front from a city like Cape Town, with everyone around, going all the way down to Saldanha, Stellenbosch, etc. I know we should then be talking probably to Westgrove, but it's part of Cape Town, and saying let's pull all the role players together and let's work out a strategy so that we can sit here in a year's or 2 time and saying we are winning an award. That's what we should be doing. We should be becoming much more proactive and doing something for the communities and not just only talking about the communities. Sorry if that was a bit hard.
Michael, I couldn't agree with you more, obviously, about what you've just said, and looking at Tun's face, I think he agrees with you too. And Lisa, for that matter. What strikes me, and let me just end with this from my side, and you may want to comment, is that the 2 places which at the destination level have achieved most around the world, one is in Spain, it's Barcelona, where it's been driven by governance. It's been driven by the city council responding to real anger from the community about the impact of tourism on their community. And the other place is in Kerala, where the state government has worked directly with village communities through the Panchayat, through the local government structures, to make change. Everywhere else in the world, we see individual businesses like Groupboss sometimes doing the most extraordinary things. But even a business as successful as Groupboss can't change Cape Town unless the city government gets behind it and says, if these businesses can do it, why can't you? And that's the question that I think we now need to ask, Michael. If some businesses can do it, why can't you do it? What is it about your business that makes it difficult? And if they will then be transparent about that, maybe we can address what the problems are. But really, until we get to that point, we're not going to make progress at the destination level. Does anybody want to say I'm wrong? Go on, Michael, tell me I'm wrong.
It's the willingness to change.
Yeah.
It's the willingness to change. You have to want to change. Otherwise, we are just talking.
Tuns, do you want to have a final comment?
Yeah, I once was in a very interesting MIT conference where the professor said, sometimes you focus with good intentions on one component instead of focusing on the broader subject. For us as a city government, the broadest subject at this point in time is job creation. And what I've heard is that it lends itself to so many opportunities to create jobs. So as a city government, we will be keen to do that. And like I said, in 2020, we started a new initiative with the private sector. It's a pity that for 2 years we had no tourism or very little tourism. But we're keen, and your point about having a conference, we're in a planning phase, which I don't want to say the date yet, but during 2023 we will have a serious get-together of minds to see how we can roll it out in Cape Town.
And don't forget the tour operators, it's not just the hotels.
Yeah.
Lisa,
Sure.
do you want to have a final word?
I completely agree with you. It's an ecosystem. It's not a silo, and that ecosystem needs to work together. And sometimes people just don't know where to start. So it takes someone like Mike to perhaps provide some advice or a toolkit, or they're just stuck. They may want to do it, but they don't know how to do it and where to start. So it's something as simple as that.
Can we thank the panel in the usual way, Michael, Chance and Lisa? Thank you very much indeed.